Okay, so today we're going to be talking about cross contour. So we did contour, and with contour, what we were discussing was varying the line quality. And basically, with this, everything that we're trying to do is build this sort of sense of three-dimensional form. So you can see right here, I've drawn in this little teeny tiny squash, which is where I always kind of like to start for looking at cross contour, little rounded objects like that. And I've uploaded a little worksheet that I always have my students do before they draw their own objects, and that'll be accessible to you guys through email or through Blackboard. The idea being that that way you don't have to spend a bunch of time actually drawing the contour. You can just practice the cross contour straight away. So what is cross contour, first of all? It's going to be lines that you put over the form to help show the form. So the kind of weird thing about cross contour is that with most objects, it's not actually, these lines aren't actually there, but they're going to be used to help amplify the form. So if you look at, say, like a aluminum can or metal can, sometimes it has those ridges, it looks kind of something like, something like this, and it'll have these ridges. And in that those ridges, in addition to being part of the object, they also show the turn of the form. So what they do is they show that there's this going on, right? That there's space behind this object. So if we had this and we drew it like an outline, remember we talked about how an outline is different than a contour, it might look something like this. So completely flat. So this is going to be my one of what not to do. This here will be my one of what you should do. So when you're doing cross contour lines, basically what you're doing is you're using lines to mimic the form. So the way that you want to start by doing that is actually going in the right direction. So how do you know if you're going in the right direction is the first question. So when you start, you want your lines to be mimicking the direction of the form. So if this up here, this top part, is going in this direction, oh, I got an email, sorry about that. Then turn that off. Then you want to go in this direction. So I'm going to start at one edge, and I'm going to make a line going across to this edge right here, like this. You want to try to be pretty steady there. Now on this side over here at the bottom, I want my line to be going in this direction. So that's the first thing to do, is to look at your object and ask yourself, well, which direction do I want to be going in? And this whole idea of direction of line is going to be really important throughout the rest of the semester. And sometimes it takes, more than one. You can do it in one fell swoop, but sometimes you need to kind of go back over it. The other really important thing about cross contour is you want your line to be a little bit darker around each edge. So it's darker here, and then it's lighter in the middle, and then it's darker there. Can you see that? So yeah, it's dark, light, back to dark. And it's really gradual, right? So what you don't want to do, and I'm going to do with this here, is have a line and just make like a dark spot. See how this is just like, it doesn't fade, it doesn't look gradual, so it just looks bizarre and it doesn't really help show anything. So you want to have your lines be really gradual. Okay, so we've talked about a few things. We want to go in the right direction, so we know if we're going in the right direction based on looking at, this is going in this direction, this is going in this direction. Then we want to have the edges be darker, but gradual. So dark, back to light, back to dark. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is that somewhere in here we need to switch directions, because here we're going in this direction and here we're going in this direction. But obviously at one point we're going to need to sort of kind of straighten out our lines almost so that we can kind of switch. So I'll start by thinking about that as I move up this form. Now the other important thing to think about is your spacing of lines. So the dark and light lines and the precision, that's really huge, as is the spacing. So what you're going to notice that I'm going to do is I'm already starting to kind of curve up my lines. Is I'm going to want to have more lines towards the top and towards the bottom where the form kind of like sort of narrows out or is kind of coming around that edge again. Is going to look a lot more three-dimensional than if you have them all totally even. So if they're like this, And even if I kind of see how this has no variation, and no variation in terms of dark, light back to dark, and no variation in terms of the distance between the lines. But this one does, and it looks a lot more three-dimensional. So the last thing that I'm going to do on this is I'm going to go back around and just sort of darken up my outer contour a little bit, just so that everything looks good. And the other thing that you want to make sure that you do is you want to go right to the line, not right here, not right there, but right, be really precise. So you don't want to go over like that, and you don't want to be like there either. You want to be right at that edge. And I know it seems like a really obvious, basic kind of thing, but that's one more thing that'll make your drawing look better. Once you have you don't always need the vertical ones, like these are maybe like the horizontal ones, but sometimes it can be nice to kind of add in, and you'll see that this sort of rounds it out even more. I'll do one more in the middle, and I'll do a couple towards the side. Okay, so now if we look at this object, we can see that this looks really, it looks really well formed. We really get the sense of the direction here. So that's cross contour. So what you don't want to do, the absolute thing that you absolutely don't want to have is a grid, right? So this obviously doesn't look like a grid. It looks like, if you've ever seen like Maya software, it looks like animation software, like a wireframe. What you don't want to have is this, right? This is not the right idea. Like this is just a grid. It just looks like a flat object with a grid over it, okay? So this is what you're going for. So again, dark, back to light, back to dark, all in one fell swoop, really gradual. Having the lines get closer together towards edges is really important. And then that precision, going right to the edge, not too far over it, not, being really, really good and precise about that. So that's where we're gonna stop right now.